Discover connection, awaken sacredness, become empowered. Join us for our show on Blog Talk Radio. Discover your spiritual gifts live.
Welcome to Discover Your Spiritual Gifts show number 47. We are your hosts, Dave and
Vialet.
Our guest today is Linda Yael Schiller. Linda Schiller is a graduate of Boston University School of Social Work and is licensed independent clinical social worker. Following years of agency work with trauma survivors, adolescents, and community mental health, she established a private practice beginning in 1987. Her 20-year academic career includes appointments as professor of social work at Regis College and subsequently at Boston University, teaching group work and clinical practice. She has published numerous articles, book chapters, and audio tapes, and is sought after speaker in the fields of trauma and dissociation, dream work and imagery, mindfulness and spirituality, energy psychology, and group work. Linda has received extensive training in many alternative psycho-spiritual and body-oriented fields of practice. Her alternative practices include training or certification in EMDR, TAT, EFT, NLP, HBLU, IFS, AEDP, Dreamwork, Hypnotherapy, Reiki, Brain Gym, sensory motor integration, Enneagram, and Shamanic healing. Linda is familiar with neuro-psychology of trauma and is able to incorporate healing methods that address the neural patterns laid down in the brain by trauma and stress. Areas of specialization include trauma dissociation, grief and loss, life transitions, anxiety and depression, and spiritual direction. She has a new book out, Modern Dreamwork, New Tools for Decoding Your Soul's Wisdom. So with all that great background, welcome, Linda. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
So we want to talk about dream work today. Tell us about dream work and dream symbology, and where do dreams come from and what do they want to show us?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a lot of questions all rolled into one. So I'll see if I can sort of tease it apart a little bit.
Sure.
Dreams come, depending on your orientation and your point of view, they either come from inside of us or outside of us, right? So they either come from the productions of our mind, our psyche, and are based in the experiences that we've had in our life and come to point us in a direction to greater understanding. And or, not either or, but and or, they are also believed to be a way that we are connected with the divine and are a conduit to the transpersonal realm and beings or energies beyond ourselves. So there's sort of a twofold answer there to where do dreams come from. And in the answer of why do we dream, or what is a dream, the purpose of a dream, dreams come to help us connect with our deeper, wiser selves, to give us information that some part of us already knows, but our conscious mind doesn't yet know. And in the wisdom of our unconscious, it has decided it's time for us to know this information so we can act on it. So we can either be delighted or make choices or do a course correction in our life, or learn something that we need to learn to move forward productively in our life.
Well, there are many symbols that come through in dreams, and there seem to be dream books that have universal symbols. Jungian has universal symbols, but do we also develop our own symbols?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I always urge people to take any symbols from a dream dictionary with a grain of caution, or maybe a salt shaker full, not just a grain. Because while there are universal symbols, because we are all shared, have a shared humanity, that things that resonate across culture, across time, we also are all unique individuals, so that we all develop our own idiosyncratic collection, if you will, of symbology and of meanings. And if we pay attention to and track our dreams over time, we learn our own patterns and we learn our own symbols, so that it's like, when I dream of X, it's like, oh yeah, I already know where to go a little bit. Because when I know that if I dream of a horse, for example, for me, that has a particular symbolic meaning. It might be about power, it might be about speed, but for somebody else, dreaming of a horse could be about being out of control, or needing to be restrained, or not needing to be restrained. So there's that individual relationship with the symbols that come through in our dreams as well.
So where do nightmares come from?
Nightmares, I like to say, are an SOS from our unconscious. And the way we can differentiate a dream from a nightmare is by the affect, or the emotional quality of the dream. Again, actually, the affective story is what tells us this is something that's a dream, or this is something that is a nightmare. It's about when we dream of standing on the beach and there's water coming in, the tides are coming in and out, and we're standing there. What is our emotional state? Are we peaceful? Are we happy? Are we calm? Or do we have a sense of dread, of impending doom, or there's a storm darkening? The first one's a pleasant dream. The second one's a nightmare. Same scene, different emotional resonance. And generally, nightmares have to do with unfinished business in our lives, things that have happened to us in our lives that have not been sufficiently resolved, or another word for it is sort of metabolized. When we encounter difficult things in our lives, life transitions, loss, grief, trauma of various forms, whether it's personal trauma that happens in someone's life, or collective trauma, such as being in a worldwide pandemic and being in isolation, we react to that with a variety of feelings, and that shows up in our dreams as well. So the dreams can point us, and the nightmares can point us in the direction that we need for healing. And even though dreams can be very terrifying, it's important to recall that every dream, including a nightmare, comes bearing gifts. And we might not see the gifts right away, but the nightmare, once resolved, gives us information, gives us a direction, gives us a resolution of something that we have not sufficiently resolved before. And there's the gift that has come hidden in the nightmare.
If you have parents who've passed years ago show up in dreams, would you see that, or how would you differentiate between they're in the spiritual realm and they're actually contacting us versus some form of unfinished business or resolution?
Well, it's a great question, and I'd add a third element to the question, which is, or are they symbolic, right? Yeah, so when your parents or departed relatives or friends show up in your dream, are they symbolic of something, and have they come through in your dream as some kind of a metaphor, or have they come through as some kind of a visit? So the way to differentiate between those first two elements are, when we have a visit from someone who's departed, there's generally a more vivid quality to the interaction. There's sort of a numinous, glowing sense of really being visited by a presence in the room that isn't there when it's a symbolic element of a dream. And your question is so timely, because I just had a birthday, and on my birthday, my mom, who passed about 5 years ago, showed up, and for the first time ever in my life, in my dream life, she sang me our special birthday song. And it was really clear. This was a visit. I heard her voice, I saw her face, and I heard her singing the happy birthday song, which is not the traditional one, but it's the one that goes to the tune of the Merry Widow Waltz that goes, I really shouldn't sing it, but I'll say the words. My voice is not great for singing. It's happy birthday, I love you. Happy birthday, and may all your dreams come true. And then it goes on for a few more stanzas. And it was such a perfect dream birthday song visit that I'm still, grinning from it. And that was very clear to me. There's no doubt. I could hear her voice, right? I could see her face. That was a visit.
You know, one of my experiences were very similar to that, Linda, and it happened. And I rarely remember my dreams until I started reading your book. So just FYI, I've really loved your book. But about 20 years ago, both of my parents have both departed. My dad departed when I was 8, my mother when I was 24. So most of my adult life has been without them, as you can imagine. And I had a dream one night, and I don't think it was a dream, but most people would say it was a dream, where they both came to me. And I knew I was in a dream state because I was like, how can this be? And I could touch my dad. I could smell him. I could hear him. And just the emotion of, how can I do this? How can I touch you? And his response was, we only have a little bit of time. So what questions do you have for me? And it was so profound that I still remember that today, that experience of, that wasn't a normal dream for me. Those are so different than that one was. That was so emotionally impacted for me. So to me, it was them communicating with me and answering questions that I had been asking, which was beautiful in the whole aspect of that. So that was a really powerful experience for me. You know, I've always told people, I don't remember my dreams. I don't pay attention to my dreams. But reading your book, I've remembered every dream since then.
Wow.
Right? They're coming through. So I've been really fascinated with your book. And you talk about our consciousness doesn't know the difference between really a dream and reality, that they exist. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that means? That there's not, it doesn't know the difference.
Sure. First, I just want to say I'm so happy for you that you got that visit. That's really, it's wonderful. And you had an experience of not only a visitation, but of being in a lucid dream state, because you were dreaming, but in your dream, you were aware that you were dreaming. And that's lucidity, when you sort of know you're dreaming while you're dreaming. It's called a lucid dream state. And to answer the other question, well, two ways of answering it. One is that we tend to think of this world being very concrete and linear and solid. And then there's sort of the ethereal spiritual world. What we actually know, not just from a mystical or spiritual perspective, but actually from science, from quantum physics, is that, to use the more mystical language, the veil between worlds is really much thinner than we believe. And there are times when it's easier to pass through that veil to connect with people, entities, thoughts, ideas from the other side, and times that it's harder. Some of us are thin boundaried people anyway, and some of us are thick boundaried people anyway, and neither one is better or worse than the other. Thicker boundaried people are the kind you really want to have, you know, on your research team and your office staff, because they're going to not be distracted and going to get the job done, and they're not going to be emotional about things. Thin boundaried people you really want to have as your spiritual guides, as your healers, as the people to help you connect with that deeper self, because our boundaries are a little more fluid. And that we know from quantum physics, and Einstein pointed us in the right direction, that all matter is energy, right? Sometimes it's more solid and sometimes it's more fluid, but it's all energy. So that's part of the answer, I think, to your question about different levels of, I think it was about different levels of consciousness. And to speak from a physiological perspective, there's been studies done while people were asleep about what's happening in their brain, and recording which parts of their brains were online or offline or active or not active. And what the research studies found is that our brain, our literal physical brain matter, does not discern between processing an event that we're experiencing in waking life and processing an event that we're experiencing in our dream life. The same parts of the brain, the neofrontal cortex and the limbic system and a few other parts of the brain are both online during waking life and sleeping life. And then there are other parts of the brain that are on and off so that we're not literally getting up and reenacting what we're dreaming, unless in the case of like sleepwalkers, for example, they have a few less of those biochemicals in their bodies, so they might get up and walk around and actually act things out.
So those of us that daydream, imagine, spend time in waking, but actually dreaming in a daydream, that same philosophy would apply to that. Is that correct?
Yes, but it would depend on how you're defining daydream.
Okay.
Right? So what we generally think of as a daydream is we're kind of musing, we're kind of looking out the window, we're supposed to be paying attention to what the professor is saying, but instead we're thinking about the vacation we wish that we were on, or the last vacation we were on, or we're thinking about what we want to have for dinner. That's daydreaming, right? It's where your body's in one place and your mind is kind of somewhere else. That's how the usual colloquial way we understand a daydream. So the phrase that I would use and people in the dream world use is in shamanic work, we talk about a waking dream state as opposed to a daydream. And a waking dream state, I think, is more along the lines of what you're speaking of. And waking dream states include things like synchronicity and deja vu and intuition, and having that sort of felt sense of something that you're connected with or knowing beyond how you could imagine your linear mind could know it. So that's how I would sort of separate a daydream from a waking dream from a sleeping dream.
Yeah, because in your book you talk about the experience with someone and a fox, how the fox kept appearing with a message and how it had a message, and looking at all what synchronicity really is in that process. Will you share a little bit about that? Because I enjoyed that story of the fox.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I was working with someone in therapy who had been having dreams of a fox showing up in her life. And we were trying to sort of figure out what it meant. And we looked at it as like a totem animal and what's the implication here? And is it important? Is it not important? And then she leaves her session one night, and about an hour or two later, I have a message on my phone machine, and she says to me, Linda, I had to call you and leave you this message. Literally just now as I was coming home, a fox ran across my driveway in front of my car. And I've never, ever seen a fox in my neighborhood before. So for us, that was like an aha that really said, wow, there's something very important about fox medicine for you that we have to pay attention to and learn about, because it's not only showing up in your sleep, but it's showing up in your waking life as well. And so the next time she came in, we talked about that experience, and I asked her some more about foxes and, what is a fox to her? What does it mean to her? And when I'm working with people, I'm also paying attention to my own sort of intuition. And if I'm getting I think this thread might be connected, I'll hold on to it. And often if I hear something in my own head, in my own inner voice more than once, it means it's probably important to the person I'm sitting with as well. So we're talking about foxes, and I'm getting in my head, the little prince. And I needed to follow that. So if you know the story of the Little Prince, a fox is one of the main characters in the story. So I asked her, and I said, by the way, this might seem like a non sequitur, but have you ever read the book, The Little Prince? And she said, oh, yes, I have. It's one of my favorite childhood books. So I said, do you remember the fox in that story? I'm wondering if that fox and the message of that fox has any relevance or relationship to you. So she said, well, I kind of remember, but not really. So I said, well, I just happened to have that book on my bookshelf. So I pulled it off my bookshelf and I opened it up to the story about the fox. And if you remember from your childhood, or maybe you've read it more recently, the little boy who comes to Earth is sitting under a tree, and a fox approaches him, and the boy and the friend wants to be friends with the fox because he's lonely. So each day he tries to encourage the fox to come a little closer and come a little closer. And finally the fox gets close and they become friends. And then one day the fox says, okay, I have to leave now. And the little boy says, but you can't go. You're my friend. I'll be all alone. And the fox says something along the lines of, I never promised you that I would stay. But the punchline here, it always makes me choke up a little bit, even, years later. He says, one runs the risk of weeping a little if one lets oneself be tamed. So the little boy had tamed the fox, and now the fox was leaving, and they were both sad. So what that spoke to for my client was some very deep thing we have been working on around attachment and relationships and vulnerability. And can she let people get close and take the risk that, yes, they might stay or they might leave, but she still will be enriched for having had the encounter. So here was a way far distant shore than the original fox in her dream or her driveway, but that's where the fox led us to, all about the importance of allowing oneself to be vulnerable and be connected in relationships. And that was a big piece of work for her.
I love how you talk about going deeper, right? Of really processing the dream for a little while. We'll have surface symbolism that has meaning, but if we take time, just like in the story of the fox, to go a little deeper and peel back the layers and kind of work it a little bit, there's usually a bigger meaning in this if we can kind of follow along that path.
Right.
Right. And so I loved bringing that in. So how does someone, you talked about all these messages or things that appear for us that give us additional meaning to our dream. And Dave talked about there's lots of books out there that talk about dream symbols and all that. If someone wants to understand more about their dreams, do you have a process or something that they can understand to kind of peel back the layers of what these dreams may mean for us?
Spoken like someone who's read the book. A very good leading question. There are lots of ways to remember and understand our dreams. And the first thing is what I was so impressed, Vialet, was that you said you never used to remember. And since sort of reading the book, you're finding yourself remembering a lot. So we tend to remember our dreams when we give them importance in our life. When we say, oh, this is something that's important to me, that it's potentially a gift or a healing or insight, as opposed to, it's just, random firings of our neurons and it doesn't matter. So when we give our dreams importance, then we tend to remember them more. That's one. Two, dreams are ephemeral. They're like, wisps of smoke. You sit up too quickly, poof, right? They're gone, right? You often wake up with like, oh man, I know I had a dream, but I can't remember it anymore. So I always recommend to people to write down their dreams. Either I have old-fashioned, I have a notebook and a pencil or pen next to me. You can write it on your phone, on your computer. Some people like to dictate it into their phone. Because if you don't record them in some way, shape, or form, chances are really high that you won't remember them, a few hours later, except, of course, for those super big dreams that really follow us around and stick with us. But in terms of understanding the layers of a dream, which is what you asked, each dream has several layers of meaning depending on how deeply we want to go into it. There's sort of surface layers, and then there are ever deepening layers of inquiry that we can get to depending on our interest and how much time we have to put into it. But so a system that I developed is called the Pardes system, and in English I'd spell that Pardes. And that's actually a Hebrew word that has a meaning in and of itself and is an acronym. So the meaning of Pardes is orchard. If you just translate from Hebrew to English, it means orchard. And it's an allegory for the Garden of Eden. So that's one layer of meaning of the word. And the other layers of meaning for Pardes is when we read the Torah, the holy book in Jewish tradition, if we're reading it from a Kabbalistic perspective, there are 4 layers that we can read the text. The P stands for Pshat, which in Hebrew means the simple. That's like the baseline layer. Here are the words, here's what happened. And then the R stands for the word in Hebrew remez, which in English means hint or to be hinted at. So the next layer are, what are our initial associations when we have this dream? The first thing that comes to our mind, oh yeah, I dreamt about the Eiffel Tower because I just saw a movie that was set in Paris. Oh yeah, so that's why I dreamt about the Eiffel Tower. That's the remez layer. And then the D corresponds to the Hebrew word drash, which comes from the word lidrosh, which means to chase after. And when rabbis give a sermon about the chapter of the book in the Bible, they call it a drash, which is a teaching. So the drash layer is, here's where we go into the deeper layers of inquiry, and we use a variety of different methods of dream work in order to get to these more symbolic layers. We might do dream reentry, we might do gestalt dream work, we might do symbol association, we might look at metaphor, all these different layers of depth we look at in the drash layer. And then the final letter, which in English would be S, in Hebrew is the word sod, and that means secret. So here's the mystical, the transpersonal, the divine layer that we can connect with not just our own lives, but connect with, I would say, for example, a visitation dream is connection with the sod layer, because you're transversing worlds into another plane of existence. So that's a format or a template that I designed. I took this pre-existing method of understanding the Torah through Kabbalah, and I applied it to doing dream work.
I love that. I love that because it gives people a pathway, something to follow. And in your book, you give lots of exercises throughout so that people can kind of work in different levels. And one of the exercises you mentioned in there is something I've done for years and years, and that is to wake up in the morning and ask a question of the universe that I'm seeking an answer. And then to pay attention throughout the day and come back to that question so that I continue to ponder that question and pay attention to what shows up.
That's right.
What shows up visually, what answers come in, and how we can get answers for certain things. Right? And doing that. And so I love the exercises in your book that you assist people in how to work within our dreams or with the universe to connect and find answers.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what you said about asking a question, we can either do that at night before going to sleep, and that's called dream incubation, where we journal for 5 minutes or an hour or as long as you want about something you are wondering about or struggling with or curious about that you'd like some answers to in your dream, and then you capture the dream and write it on the same page as your question, whether or not you can see how it's related in the beginning. And then as you work with the dream back and forth between the dream and your question, you'll begin to see the connection. And then the same thing as you said, Vialet, you can do that in the day as well. So to tune into the possibility of having a waking dream where some kind of a synchronistic deja vu intuitive experience shows up, but you've already primed the pump because you're looking for it. It's like, oh, that's what I was looking for. I'm not sure if I wrote this in the book or not. I might have, but I think I did actually. But one of my favorite examples is some years ago, I was asking myself a question about a relationship that I was in. I think it's probably about the man who I was dating at the time, who's now my husband. But there was some question about that. And so I was just kind of holding the question in my mind as I was taking a walk one day. And I looked up at one point and I saw a billboard. And on the billboard, it said, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I think it said beautiful fun. It was actually a billboard advertising a hair salon, but that phrase about like beautiful fun was like, that just resonated for me. It's like, that's what I'm looking for in my answer to my question. And it was a hairdressing salon billboard. So you never know where you might find the answers.
Well, we're going to take a short break here, and we're going to hear some information about the store, so stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Violet Rain, Master Teacher of the Akashic Records series of classes here at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts. If you've been interested in the Akashic Records are the life book or the etheric records of everything that we've ever thought, spoken, done, all of our contracts, relationships since we left Source. It is a valuable resource of information that people are able to tap into to get clarity, to get guidance, just to find out why things are the way they are in their life. The Akashic really helps us do that. This is a great series of classes if you're already getting intuitive information, meaning you're either getting visuals or you're hearing things or you just know things or you feel things. This is a great class to step into to amplify the information that you're receiving from a higher level of source versus just your intuition. If you'd like to find out more about my series of classes for the Akashic Records, please check out on our website under classes and look for Akashic Record Certification. I hope to see you in class, or I hope to see you at the center here at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.
Well, welcome back to Discover Your Spiritual Gifts. We have our guest, Linda Yael Schiller, and we're talking about dreams and dream interpretation and all these wonderful things. And she has a great book, Modern Dreamwork, New Tools for Decoding Your Soul's Wisdom. So you're talking about waking dreams or inspiration. Being an engineer in aerospace for many years, you know, I years ago, I was working on the MX missile, and I was working on the electronics that would test the missile for the test flights. And we had a failure in the lab, and I was working 12-hour shifts at night trying to solve it. And we had a strange set of phenomena where several boxes were all simultaneously not behaving properly. And I left the plant at about 7:30 in the morning. I was headed home, and all of a sudden it hit me what it had to be, and I did a U-turn and went back to work. And it was actually a piece of a power supply in the lab was failing, and it was powering all these boxes. And it didn't fail hard; it failed marginally. And so these errors came and went in these boxes. And I went back in. Yeah, that's what it was. And it's like, okay, you know, it just boom. That flash of insight had come.
Right. That's a great expression, that sort of flash of insight. And I've heard it described like someone like, all of a sudden the candle's lit in the darkness and it illuminates what was previously hidden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm always open to inspiration. I do so much work now where I use my claircognizant capabilities, and I just get downloads of information, particularly in past lives, but other areas. And I'll just get these, you know, wonderful insights and talk to the people and say, yeah, that's it. I see what you mean. And so I'm very open to this unconscious information coming through. And, you know, every day I try to work on my clarity so I don't have my own filters in place that would color the information in any way. Great.
So two comments. One is that I'm so impressed, Dave, that you went from a very left brain linear scientific field and sort of listened to your intuition and listened to your right brain creativity. And you're really like a whole brain person, right? Because you're firing on all cylinders there on both sides of the brain. In a way, it's probably more than a lot of people do. So that was one comment. And the other was, I very much liked your perspective when you said you want to let your own filters kind of not color what
Yeah.
you're sharing with other people. And that's the same principle, like with the story I told about the fox and the little prince. And I
Mhm.
said, I'm getting, a hit on the little prince somehow. I don't know if that's related or not. Let me check with you and see if it is. I mean, I thought it was, but I'm not going to superimpose my idea. I want to check to make sure it resonates with the other person first.
Mhm.
Same idea.
Well, you're talking about the fox and fox symbolism. One of the symbols that's out there that I don't particularly care for is the coyote and the coyote medicine. I do lots of energy and energy clearing work. The last thing I need is coyote medicine that comes in and confuses the trickster, that type of stuff. I deal with the trickster so much in my clearing work, and I even had this brought home. We were taking a trip to go down to Durango, and we stopped out by Buena Vista at a restaurant called the Coyote Corner or something. It took us 2 hours to get our lunch. The kitchen was messed up. The order was messed up. We had hungry grandkids there.
Oh boy.
And it's like, I just knew, when we pulled in that restaurant that we shouldn't go to the Coyote. It just, this was not going to work out well.
So next time you're going to trust your intuition, and you're going to drive another 10 minutes to find a restaurant
Yes.
with a different
And
name.
we'll go to Burger King or something. We're not going to the Coyote.
Oh, but those are all such great messages for us if we pay attention, right? That's part of this process. If we're open and trust those instincts, we seem to do better when we do that. We always learn our lessons, like going to the restaurant. It was like, I knew this was going to be a problem, and it was a problem, right? So it's definitely a lesson learned, right? So I love when the messages come in. So pretty awesome. So Miss Linda, you talk about dream circles. I've never heard of dream circles where people gather and share. So tell us a little bit how that works and what that looks like. I've never heard of a dream circle.
Wow, Vialet, you don't know what you've been missing. Oh my God, you guys are going to have to start a dream circle. So it's so awesome. It basically, the short form, and then I'll give you the long form. The short form is people get together and share their dreams and talk about their dreams and help each other figure out and understand what's the meaning and what's the message that their dreams are. So you can do it formally, you can do it informally, you can do it with just a bunch of friends, you can do it with a facilitator who's sort of in charge and holds the space and is paid. You can do it as a one-off, Saturday evening fun thing, or you can have a regular ongoing circle that goes on. Well, you can say, I'm going to do this for 6 weeks, or I'm going to meet once a month for 6 months. Or as in the case of myself, I've been meeting with my dream circle. I have two. I have a personal one that's me and some friends. And then I have a professional one I facilitate. My personal one, it's in 35 years of meeting every month. And we know each other pretty well at this point because we do dream work together. And when we do dream work, you really get into sort of, your soul's language. And the other circle that I've been running professionally is what I call as a group worker. There are different types of groups you can have. My personal one is a closed group. There are 4 of us. We don't invite anybody else. That's it. We're done. My other one, I cap it at 6 people. And then when, for whatever reason, someone has to leave, they move out of town or their life changes and it's no longer sort of works for them to be in a dream circle in their life, then we open up a space until we get another person in. And that one I've been running for 25 or 30 years in an ongoing fashion where people have come and gone. But I think the newest person in that circle right now has been there about 6 or 7 years. So people tend to stay because it's so fascinating and engaging, and it's such a wonderful way to connect. So that in a nutshell is, that's what a dream circle is. There's no one way to do it. There are many different ways, but it's a wonderful way to self-exploration and to connect with others around, let's figure out what the dream means. And what makes a dream circle so powerful is that none of us can really completely and fully unpack, as Jung would say, or understand our own dream by ourselves. And why is that? It's because it's like trying to see the back of your own head, right? Without two mirrors. You need those two mirrors to be able to see what is unseen to you. So when you're sitting in a dream circle with other people, they can see things about your dream that you can't see because they have a different perspective than you do. And the additional benefit, of course, is that when you're working with a group of people, we tend to start to resonate with each other. So you might share a dream and I might get an aha or an insight from your dream, even though I wasn't the one who dreamt it. And that kind of thing happens in circles all the time as well. So it's sort of a win-win for working in dream circles.
Kind of like gallery messages, people that do gallery messages saying, I might be giving a message to Sam, but if it resonates with Sue, take it, because the group kind of syncs together and the energy sync and the messages can be for everyone or for many in the group versus just one person. So same idea of connecting, right?
That's right, exactly.
Same idea of how the universe works. Well, you talk about in your book that this is the soul wisdom. So I imagine really decoding your dreams and thinking about it, you get some really deep wisdom. What are some stories you can share, some aha moments that you've gotten throughout doing these dream circles that you could share with us?
Wow. It's a great question, and it's so broad. I have to kind of like tune in to some aha. All right. So today, let's start with today. An hour ago, I was working with someone on her dream, and we were working on, I actually, this is good because I have the notes still right next to me because I just finished working with her a little while ago. And she had been having a series of dreams about insects or bugs of some sort. And she had had a dream a couple of weeks prior about ants in her house. And that the ants then, in her dream, transformed into turtles, and they were on their back. Like when a turtle's on its back, it's a problem for it. But both the ants and the turtles had these kind of hard shells. And then the next thing, as we worked on the dream, actually in her dream, the turtle shell transformed to be like a warrior's hat, like a Chinese warrior hat. So we were thinking about what's the meaning of these insects and then these animals and then this warrior. And so she's talking about things that have bugged her in her life, like the ants, feeling like she herself had this kind of carapace, right, of being hard shelled as a form of protection for herself, and how she's needed that in her life to get through various difficulties and traumas that she's had. And at the end of that dream, she ends up with a human, right? She went from an ant to a turtle to a Chinese warrior. So she was human now, and this felt empowered and protected as opposed to being bugged by these ants that were like invading her space. So we talked about how in her life she needed to protect herself, and what she was doing and what she is doing, and whether she still needs to do it, because sometimes things we need to protect ourselves from when we're young, we don't still need to when we're older. So fast forward then to a couple weeks later, she has another dream, and that's the dream we worked on today, where she had what she said were crystal spiders that were in her mouth, and she had to keep pulling them out of her mouth. But it sounds kind of weird, but when she told the dream, and this is where the affect piece comes in, she wasn't like, oh, this is gross or this is scary. She was just kind of calm and kind of like, wow, these spiders are really beautiful. They're crystallized. And then as she went on and talked with me, she said, but they're like Swarovski crystals. They're really beautiful. They're even awesome. So we talked about the connection between the previous dream with the ants and the turtles, and here's another dream with an insect in it, a spider. So we've got a theme coming through, right? Got a theme coming through. And she says, well, ants and spiders. She says, I don't like bugs. If I find them in my house, I'll either kill them or put them outside. And so we talked about the ants and the spiders were invasive and intrusive creatures if she finds them in her house. So there's a theme right there. What in her life has been invasive or intrusive? And so there's many things we could point to, both historically and not so long ago. But what was key here is in this dream, the spiders were transformed into something really, really beautiful, an awesome Swarovski crystal. And she said she still had to keep taking it out of her mouth, and that the spider legs had kind of sharp, pointy bits that hung onto her tongue. You can't make this stuff up. And that she had to pull it off, right? She said, but it wasn't hard. I could keep getting it off. I could easily get rid of it. So we talked about the sharp, pointy bits of her anger that she still, either was she swallowing that or was she able to express in her life? And we talked about the theme of transformation. So here we see a transformation of the invasive, intrusive, sharp-pointed bugs in her life being transformed into something beautiful and crystallized. And she also said, oh yeah, like crystal clear. So there was clarity here too. So this was a big aha for her. And she's at a life stage of, we might call it sort of a midlife kind of turning point, where she's rethinking, who am I? What do I want to do in my life? And so she's going to take these images now and continue to write about them and draw about them to get even more crystal clarity about where she's going next in her life.
I love that
story.
I love that. So do you work with clients on their dreams? Is that something that you offer?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
All the time?
That's not the only thing I do, but often I work with clients on the dreams if they're interested in it, yeah.
Well, talk to us a little bit about what you offer, what you do. If somebody wanted to work with you, what are some of the things that you do to help, clients or services, classes, whatever that might be for you? Share with us what you offer.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, and so I see individuals, and I also have done, groups of different types for many, many years. And as Dave mentioned, and that bio was so long, it must have come from somewhere you pulled it off, some resume that I wrote. But I'm trained in a lot of different alternative ways of working, as well as traditional training. I have an MSW, and I've trained in psychodynamic psychotherapy and cognitive therapies and sort of more traditional ways of working. But I've also trained in EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is one of the most powerful integrative therapies out there that allow you to work at a body, mind, spirit level. And I'm trained in a number of different forms of energy psychology that are along the lines of EMDR, such as like what is colloquially known as the tapping. A lot of people know about tapping. It's EFT, which is emotional freedom technique that works with the meridians in the body, where you identify a problem, you think about the emotions, where they are in your body, and then there's a series of points you tap while you're thinking about the problem. So you're integrating a body-mind perspective as you're working it through. And then I'm trained in a lot of different somatic, body-oriented types of work and spiritual forms of work. I've been a student of Kabbalah for many years, so I integrate Kabbalah and shamanistic work. And in terms of what I do, in addition to seeing individuals, I run groups. Right now I'm doing a lot of consulting and teaching. I consult both for healthcare organizations and synagogues, churches, mosques, for religious groups, for mental health collectives, and sometimes just people who get together and say, wow, I'm really interested in this. Can we do a training on this? And then I'm writing another book, which keeps me really busy. And actually the book I'm writing now is on nightmares, specifically, nightmares and trauma.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You'll have to let us know when that comes out so we can chat with you again. I really love your book, and we're going to carry it in the store because I think it would be really beneficial for our community and students, so they'll be able to pick it up in our store at the center. And I always tell folks that we talk to, if you're ever in Denver, let us know. We would love to host you for a book signing or a meet and greet or any of that, especially after things shift and change and we have gatherings again, right? But keep that in mind. But I have really enjoyed your book and this conversation today. So thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us.
Yeah, I need to ask the critical question. Do you offer all your services on the phone so it doesn't matter where people are?
I have Zoom. I mean, I can do phone, but I have Zoom, and I also have another platform that's a HIPAA compliant platform called Doxy. So,
Okay.
yeah, I can nowadays. It's virtual.
Yeah, well, all my clients are virtual now. So
yeah, hopefully we'll soon be able to meet in person again, but we're going to wait till that vaccine is out there. till we get the bug, right? That's been bugging our whole culture.
Right? That's right. Well, I have personal experience with the bug in the past week, so.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So it's been pretty trivial. I had a sore throat and that's about it. So.
Oh, I'm glad that was it. Good.
Yeah. So it's no big deal for me.
Good.
So.
Good.
So anyway, let's talk about your website so people can find out more about you. It's Linda Yael, Yael Schiller, SCHILLER.com. And I've been there, and lots of good information there, lots of explanation. So nice job.
Thank you. And if I may also, there's a website for the book, which is moderndreamwork.com, www.moderndreamwork.com. And there, if you want to read about the book before making a decision to buy it or not, it gives, a summary. It has people's endorsements. It has a whole list of all the podcasts and radio shows and appearances that I've had. So you guys are going to be up there too pretty soon. As soon as I'll get my web guy to put this link up, so send me a link and you'll be up there too. And then there are links to click on that make it easy to purchase it. First you should go to your bookstore. That's number one. If for some reason they can't get to the bookstore, there are also links.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that information. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for taking the time. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
This has been great. Thank you. Okay, so for all our listeners, thank you for listening to this show. And please stay with us for some messages from several of our practitioners at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts.
I'm Kate Thomason, aka the Joy Architect. And they call me the Joy Architect because I help people build lives based on their joy. I learned from a near soul death what it takes to make a life joyful, because I realized that was what was missing. And when I brought it all back in, I realized, aha, this is how it works. This is how you make life fun. You bring the soul in, and now I have a method, a process by which people can have this relationship with themselves, their greater self, very quickly. And they find that foundation of fun in their life that they can use to build their life on. I'm a practitioner at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, so they can look on the website under the practitioners there. Or you can find me at my website, KatherineBlakeThomason.com, KathereIne, Blake, BLAKE, Thomason, TOMASSON.com. I'm available by appointment 7 days a week. I work at the center on Fridays from 10 to 5.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Kemper. I am a restoration master healer. I work through people's energy grid as I see it. I call it grid working. And I also work with Mother Gaia and the ley lines of the earth, but I also see that and can translate it around somebody's energy body. I got into this through working with another teacher that was showing us to look around a body or an energy body, and I realized that I could see colors. And so when I pinpointed the color, Then she made me trace it all the way back. She said, you have to trace it all the way back to the origin. And once I did that, I realized that I could see around people in what looks like an Excel grid sheet. And we get things stuck in that grid sheet, or we get formulas that are blown. And I help people restore those grids through different energies. It could be dragon energy, archangel energy, colors, flowers, all sorts of, everybody works with something different. And I help bring those through to restore your grids. You can find me at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts in historic downtown Littleton. I work at this center on Wednesdays and Thursdays between 10 and 5.
Discover connection, awaken sacredness, become empowered. Join us for our show on Blog Talk Radio.